So I think that is a really, that's a difficult term in our age, isn't it? Because it's good to be politically correct if you understand what it means. But what does it mean? Right? Because the pendulum always swings too far in everything, right? Goes too far most of the time. So, and political correctness is an evolving thing. What was appropriate years ago, right, is not appropriate now. What was appropriate 10 years ago is not appropriate now. I remember having a discussion with a farmer's wife because he said manure at the table while we were having a discussion. And she looked at me and says, "Don't worry, it took me 10 years to get him to say that." Right? You know, what's proper at that time to say whatever. So I was thinking back on the whole gay and lesbian correctness in terms of what happened on the news and what happened on television programs. And which is an interesting thing in North America. Situation comedies often dictate how political correctness works out. Because it's easier to say things with humor, right, than it is with almost anything else. I mean, I could say something seriously to somebody and try to argue them into a stance, and they'll ignore it, but I can joke about it. I mean, I've gotten away with that for years in church, right? Just make a joke first. So I remember this. I don't know if you remember this. You remember this program? We have now started to watch all the reruns of this. And you realize how much of the lexicon of what you use now started on that particular show. And the one that came back to me is when they started talking about friends of theirs who were gay or lesbian, they would say something like, "Well, you know Sally, she's lesbian." And then the rest of them would all say together, "Not that there's anything wrong with that." Remember that? And we were watching that the other day. We were laughing so hard because it was the first time on television people would talk about that as if it was a normal thing to talk about. And they would say, "But I think he's gay." And then all the rest of them would say, "Not that there's anything wrong with that." And this would go on through the whole program. And again, like when you watched it in those years, I mean, it was a bit shocking. Because here it was openly being discussed, but in a kind of a throwaway humorous. And when I watch it now, it's nothing. I mean, it's cornflakes. But when you watched it back in the 80s, you realize that was an introduction into using language about a very difficult and tenuous subject, which made it okay. Because basically what they're saying on the shows, what they were saying was, that's fine. And they were reminding each other, and also, which I found was interesting, anybody who was within earshot, that this is okay. And how many times in our own circles, when we're talking with people, and people who view the world very differently than we do, say something that's offensive, how many times do we say nothing? Like, how many times do we just turn away? We do it all the time. I know I do it. I know I'll be somewhere in the neighborhood or somewhere with people I maybe don't know as well, and somebody will make some kind of comment, and instead of saying something, I won't say anything. Yet it goes against the core of who I am and what I believe. But I will let that pass because I don't want to offend anybody. And yet, I have just been offended. Right? The right I would do, I do not do. And the wrong I wouldn't do, I let happen. Right? So that I always thought that's so revolutionary because it was outside, it was loud, it was pointed, even though it was funny. Now that brings us to another character. I had to put this one up because I just love the line. To be politically correct just takes too much time. Right? There's the whole opposite, isn't it, of just about everything you could possibly think of. The idea that to try to take the time to say things properly, or to say things with care, or with compassion, or with even just a little bit of thoughtfulness, It just takes too much time. I was going to use a cartoon, but I thought, I got to stop. I got summer's here. I need to put Donald Trump on vacation. But I saw a lovely cartoon this week. It was of Donald Trump with his head on a hinge, and the sort of head was flipped over, and Putin was walking around inside his head, and underneath it said, "Oh, it's surprisingly roomy in here." But I'm like, it's too easy, the laughs. See, I'm even saying bad things now, aren't I, right? I'm going against my own sermon. Anyway, I've used this before. I think it's a good thought to have all the time, right? Be sure to taste your words before you spit them out. Right? I think it's really, really important. And that runs for everything from the gamut of talking to neighbors, to talking in church, to talking to your family, talking to your siblings, your parents. I am sometimes shocked at the way we talk to each other as human beings. Fascinated and shocked by what we say to each other and how we say it. And again, in the summer, it's fascinating because all the windows are open, right? And I spend a lot of time sitting outside. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I have now become my parents' generation. I used to laugh when we first started going to Prince Edward Island because down there the bugs are all there all summer. They never go away. So what people do is they screen in the front of their garage, right? They've got nice backyards with gazebos and stuff, but they screen in their garage. They even put a door in it, and then they sit in their garage and look at the front. And I'm like, who does that, right? Well, apparently I do that now. I have a lovely deck on the back of the house, great big table, looks over, there's birds and squirrels and all kinds of stuff out there. I sit in my garage and stare at the neighbors. I don't know why, but they come and go all the time, so it's kind of entertaining. But you hear it all the time. You hear how people talk in the summer because it's loud, right? You're outside. And I'm always surprised that at some point people just don't say, we should sit down and maybe think about what we're saying to each other. Strange thing in the modern age. So we get to pride. And I know the whole pride thing really is kind of polarizes people. Because if you're not part of the LGBTQ community, plus community, it seems excessive when you watch it. Right? The way people dress, the way they act, how they perform, all that kind of stuff. But when you think about growing up as someone who either couldn't tell who they were, couldn't act like they wanted to act, couldn't be the person they wanted to be, that's what they wanted, was just to be loved for being who they were. Nothing more. And so when they get together for a parade, they're going to express their love for each other in every way it's possible. So for me, it makes perfect sense. I might not understand the action, but I understand the purpose. And I think it's a very simple thing. And I think some of us just should take a pill and relax. Because it doesn't matter. If we're not part of it, it doesn't matter to us. Let it happen. So I was talking to, if we go to the next one. I was talking to a teacher on my street. And we sort of got onto this conversation kind of accidentally. And she teaches grade 5 and 6s. And she said over the last 10 years, one of her most important roles in the school, and this is up where we are, Keswick, Pefferlaw, Sutton, and around there, she said, is trying to deprogram the children who come to school because of what they've heard at home. She said she used to have all, like I said, used to have to teach kids how to read and write. Those were always the primary things, right? Well, they all have computers. Now they figure it out or they wouldn't be able to text, right? She says now she spends her time trying to help the kids relearn the way people are and how to care for them and how to be compassionate and how to be non-judging. And she said because the kids are so out there in this age, she said they need to be like that earlier and earlier in life. I thought I was talking with her, I was quite stricken with the idea that here's a human being who has chosen that role by herself. and has recognized that that is her responsibility, because, as we hear so often, those things should be taught at home. Well, the things that are getting taught at home are not good things. Prejudice, discrimination, racism are what are sometimes getting taught at home. Or ignorance, just plain ignorance. And that she's taken herself, when the kids come to school, to teach them respect and tolerance and acceptance. I thought that was fascinating. It really made me feel good about the idea, because then I think she would be an example for other teachers in that school system. It really made me feel like some of that is sinking in for people. So I wanted to end up with this last couple of things. Happy Pride Week. And I want to remind everybody, 10% of the world's population is gay. Whether you like it, whether you don't like it, whether you're happy with the statistic, whether you're not. And that's the one end of the spectrum. Then there's a whole mid-range of spectrum. So in every group of 10, one person, or maybe two, might be gay. In every group of 100, there's 10. Every time you're in the grocery store, every time you're in school, every time you're in church, there are people who are gay and lesbian, sometimes transgendered. So you have to be careful of how you talk, because you're talking about them and us. You're talking about us and us. And I think you'd be shocked sometimes if you realized what your words have hurt and how they've hurt people. So, again, back to Paul. The answer, thank God, is that Jesus can and does. He acted to set things right in this life of contradictions, where I want to serve God with all my heart and mind, but am pulled by the influence of sin to do something different. I would remind you that even though Paul had some difficulty with same-sex relationships in regards to men, remind you that Paul started out his life by murdering Christians. That's what he did. He rode around, he rounded up Christians, he dragged them in, and he crucified them. And then he had a conversion to Christianity. And he became the most vociferous apostle of them all. And my conviction has always been, give him another 50 years, he would have had another conversion, and he would have scratched out some of those pieces in his letters, and things would have been different. I like to think Paul had that about him. Thank you very much.